Okay, the first gauge is your altimeter. It tells you how many meters off the ground you are. These horizontal gauges with the 5 and the 10, the horizontal bars across your heads-up display, that tells you the degrees forwards and backwards your helicopter is tilted. So as a good rule of thumb, you don't want to tilt your helicopter really past 20 degrees, either forwards or backwards, because if you take it much further than that, you will cause your helicopter to flip over and you will not recover it, and you will have to bail out and you will lose your helicopter and you will maybe die or kill your secondary gunner. So as I fly around, I try to keep the heads-up display firmly in view, and I try to keep it relatively pretty much in the 10 box most of the time when I'm trying to shoot people. And then of course when I'm trying to move quickly, I will, move it much steeper, or if I'm tracking an enemy like this at high altitude, it's okay. But at low altitude, you do not want to move your helicopter, ever more than 15 degrees when you have low altitude. And low altitude will be, if you're below 100 meters. So right here I'm launching AA missiles, and this guy has ECM jammer, and I'm chasing him, but as I see my heads-up display go to 20 degrees, I start pitching back. And now that I see my heads-up display in this crazy diagonal pattern, I know that, oh my goodness, I'm pitching too far to the right, so I need to recorrect. And that is why you really need to fly in first person in the helicopters. In the jets, you can fly around in third person, but really in the helicopter, you need to have the heads-up display to do anything. You really need it for when you're turning left and right even. If you don't have it, you might crash on a simple left and right turn. Because if you use the left thumbstick when you're pitched, say 20 degrees forward, that will cause you to crash into the ground if you're at low altitude. So you need to be very aware of the pitch of your helicopter when you're doing these low strafing runs. And when you're an attack chopper, these low strafing runs are devastating, and my secondary gunner is just really mopping these guys up. And as I turn around using the left thumbstick, I keep the crosshairs pretty much in the 5 to 10 box, and that keeps a nice stable platform for my gunner to shoot from. I'm not, making these wild, unpredictable motions for my gunner. He's gotten kind of accustomed to, okay, we're doing low altitude, kind of smooth runs, so he's getting his bearings. Now, I'm carrying rocket pods and air-to-air, rocket pods and air-to-air missiles, and I've got a lock, so whether you have IR flares or ECM jammer, when you get a lock, just fly away from the, main battlefield, and if the lock maintains, you'll know it's an air vehicle. So even though I don't have air radar, I pretty much know it's a jet because, well, right now he's in front of me, but because he was still locking onto me when we were far away from the battle, I knew it had to be a jet. Now, when a jet's playing chicken with you in a helicopter, you can either, hit the left trigger and go down, or hit the right trigger and go up, and you basically have to guess, which direction the helicopter is going to pick. And it's pretty much 50-50, and there are a lot of mid-air collisions that happen in Battlefield. You would be surprised. So whenever you get a lock, just bug out of there and try to break the lock, just get away. And a lot of times it'll be a SOFLAM, actually, so it really helps to just, get away and kind of re-get your bearings. Also, if you're ever going to get into a dogfight, in aerial vehicles, you don't want to get into a dogfight below guys with stingers. You want to lead them, out of bounds or, away from the battlefield, so. As we start doing strafing runs, I try to keep the platform, very predictable for my gunner, so, I let him see what we're doing from a very great distance, and I got my rocket pods, and so I'm trying to take out anti-tank rounds on the ground, and I see that I have a lock, and I think it's a guy on the ground with stingers, so I'm going to try to keep it low and try to use these hills for cover. And another thing is, when you pop flares, as your flares are recharging, you really want to get away from the guy with the missile, so that even if he fires a second flare, or a second missile, you'll be able to fire your reloaded flares, because you created enough distance and gave yourself the extra time. So, as we do these strafing runs, you really want to pick apart the tanks with the rocket pods and kind of keep a smooth, steady platform. Essentially, you want to take out the air-to-air vehicles first, and then you want to take out the ground vehicles second. And if you don't know what to do, just start softening up the objectives, either the MCOMs or the flags of conquest. Just start, dumping ordnance on it, and that will usually confuse the enemy and kind of help your team out. So, this is going back to, I've heard the air-to-air missiles post-patch do not work, but I think what's happening is people are not seeing the ECM smoke or chaff, or the game's not loading it or something. But, I kind of think that's what's going on. The ECM has been working for me when I use it to stop missiles, but you do have to deploy it rather on the sooner side, not the later side. So I think it works if the missiles are deployed very quickly, but it doesn't if they're kind of, very close to target. They're not as forgiving as flares. But right now I'm definitely rolling around with flares because everyone spawns in them, although I do prefer ECM Jammer, just because it refreshes quicker. But flares are, not a bad thing to, have. They're definitely better than having nothing. Going back to the strafing runs, just using rocket pods, coming in steep, and as I pull up from low altitude, I'm usually at the 5 bar. So keeping it at the 5 bar when you're low to the ground is incredibly important, and notice that every time I get away from the 5 bar, I come back to it, just to keep this thing from, hitting the ground. So if you have it at the 5 bar and holding down the right trigger, you'll continue to, increase in elevation, but if you're pitched 10 degrees or more and you hold the right trigger, you'll just kind of go forward and maybe even lose elevation, so it doesn't really matter that you're holding down the right trigger, you really need to be pitched at 5 degrees or shallower, that way you actually, maintain lift. And when you're fighting jets, like a jet can easily shake you by flying, straight up in the air, and there's really nothing you can do in a helicopter because you can't climb as quickly. So, if you don't have extinguisher, and you're not in a helicopter that can, have a welding torch used on the fly, you're gonna have to land this thing, and there's really 2 ways to land a helicopter, but I recommend just coming in full speed and just keep the horizontal bar perfectly level and put it at 0 as you hit the ground. And you can come in at pretty fast speed, but you'll be okay. And right here, nice fast landing. And I used to land all slow and just lower the helicopter in place, but that was much more difficult than these kind of fast, just slam into it landings. And, faster is better. And you'd be surprised how hard it is to actually, lower the helicopter perfectly flat on the road. It's very hard when you can't see what you're lowering onto, so that's why I recommend just coming in like kind of like a ski jump. Yeah, it's firing 2 air-to-air missiles, and the jet goes down. So, I don't know about the air-to-air missiles being broken. I just feel like I think people didn't know how to use them properly before the patch, and people kind of don't know how to use them properly after the patch. Like, the air-to-air missiles pre-patch were never, 100% reliable, and now post-patch, they're still not 100% reliable, so I don't understand. I don't see a difference, personally, but, that's just me. I do have a lot of time in both the jets and the helicopters. But he's firing 2 missiles, and the flares go off, so I have the lock still, and I'm waiting for my missiles to respawn. I fire, I think, 2 more, and it hits him. So, the air-to-air missiles to me seem pretty reliable, but you have to use them properly. When you're trying to not get hit by stingers, the best thing to do is just fly overhead and just pass them, and you can't maintain the lock. So this was me chasing a jet who was flying straight up, like I mentioned earlier when you're trying to get rid of a helicopter, and I basically chased him too much, and when your heads-up display is upside down, as you see here, you are fucked, and I do recommend you just jump out immediately.
Oh, life could be a dream if I could take you up in paradise up above. If you would tell me I'm the only one that you love, life could be a dream, sweetheart. Hello, hello again, shaboom, and up and we'll meet again. Oh, life could be a dream if only all my precious